Thank you, Jane. Yeah, I'm going to try to do that today too. Keep this as non-technical as possible. It's hard sometimes. We're talking about technical things, so sometimes it's going to get a little technical. Plenty of time at the end, hopefully, for questions. Again, welcome everyone. My name is Matt Gotschall. I'm the Communications Director at Salvus TG. I wanted to start by introducing my company. Salvus TG was founded in 2006 in Kansas City. We are an information technology and cybersecurity firm located just down the street in the new Longview area of Lee Summit. Like I said, we were founded in 2006 and specialize in technology support and cybersecurity for small and medium-sized businesses. Over the years, we've developed a strong understanding of how small businesses work and how they rely on their technology to serve their clients to be both reliable and to be secure, and that's going to be what we're talking about today, how you can start to secure your environment and protect your data. Before I get started, I want to say that if it seems like I'm looking at my notes a lot, it's because I am, and that is for your benefit. If I got up here with no strict outline, we would be here for hours. So I wanted to save the time at the end for questions. I found that the Q&A and the discussion at the end can sometimes be just as beneficial as the presented material. So I'm going to do my best to stay on topic so we've got time at the end. To begin, I want to emphasize the importance of just understanding security topics and the threats that exist to small businesses. In the times we find ourselves in, the best first step is simply maintaining awareness of cybersecurity and knowing that it is very dynamic. It's a complicated topic. Small business owners like to stick their heads in the sand and cross their fingers and hope nothing happens to them. The sad reality is that it's going to happen to them, and it's going to happen to everyone. It's because cybercrime is lucrative and small businesses are a very easy target. So no surprise, 85% of MSPs, and that's what Salvus TG is, a managed services provider, fancy name for IT outsource group. 85% of MSPs consider ransomware to be the biggest threat to the small business community. Salvus is in that 85%, and that's because we've seen firsthand the impact that ransomware has on the SMB sector. For those of you that don't know, just in case, ransomware is a type of malware that prevents or limits access to your systems, either by locking your screen or more commonly encrypting your data until a ransom is paid. And ransomware is especially nasty because it will spread from the infected device and crawl the network and look for other data to encrypt. So once it's in, it spreads fast, and it spreads silently and often too fast for people to notice. Timing is another trick in ransomware, and that's when a cybercriminal or a bad actor, and those are terms that I'm going to kind of use interchangeably throughout the day, will gain access to a system, and then they will wait until off hours or weekends to deploy an attack. That just maximizes their window of time to encrypt files before someone will notice. Many years ago, small businesses were kind of able to fly under the radar. They kind of had a level of anonymity. And that's unfortunately changed. Small businesses have kind of flipped and are now at the top of the list of cybercriminals. And that's because, one, they have the most to lose if their data is encrypted. And two, they do the least to protect their data. So you combine those two things, and that's just a really juicy looking target for a cybercriminal. In addition to how lucrative it is, it's also scary easy to deploy ransomware. A Google search will give you forums and guides and YouTube videos that will teach you how to write ransomware and then how to deploy it. On top of that, if you're lazier than that, you can buy the pre-written ransomware and deploy it yourself. If you're lazier than that, you can just go onto a dark web forum and find someone that is selling the whole thing as a service. You have a little bit of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, you can find the guy, you pay him, and they will deploy a ransomware attack on a target of your choice, just for a little bit of money. So how does ransomware get in? The most common way ransomware enters an environment is phishing. Everyone's heard of phishing, they see it all the time, and it's estimated that 3 billion phishing emails are sent every day. So technology, a computer is much more difficult to fool than a person. So the cyber criminals have decided that they are going to target the weaker links, and that's your staff, the human person. Without the right controls in place, it just kind of takes one click. It takes one person downloading an attachment and opening it, or clicking a link in a phishing email and going to the wrong site to become compromised. And these phishing emails are getting scary convincing and incredibly sophisticated every day. You know, we see them from our clients often. They'll send it in and they'll say, hey guys, is this ransomware, or, you know, is this a phishing attempt? And we'll look it over and we'll say, yeah, you know, sometimes for us it's obvious. Oh, of course that's a phishing email. But there are times that I get them in my own inbox that I go, I don't know. I don't know, right? Someone that's seen a million phishing emails, I still am not sure if it is or if it isn't. In that case, it's just best to disregard and maybe contact the person directly. But the point is, they are becoming so convincing that even some experts have trouble determining what's real and what's fake. When people fall for a phishing email, they'll often refer to it as being hacked. The term hacking often elicits images of like a dark, hooded figure in a room with a bunch of monitors on the screen, like banging away at a keyboard, kind of like in the movies, right? They're trying to bypass the firewall or gain remote access to the server. And some criminals do that. They do break in that way. But that's not what's happening at the small business level. It's just so much easier to ask you for your password. And that's all that phishing is, someone simply asking you for your credentials. Some of you are probably thinking, I see phishing emails all the time. I know what to do and I know how to avoid them, or, you know, my people aren't silly enough to just give away their password when they're asked. But that's not true for everyone. Phishing is popular, 3 billion a day because it works. Somebody out there is falling for it, otherwise they would have found something new by now. So I have a clip from an episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live from a few years ago, but I think it's just as relevant today as it was then. Some of you may have seen it, but I think it's fun to share.
About cybersecurity today and how safe people's passwords are. What is one of your online passwords currently?
It is my dog's name and the year I graduated from high school.
Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a Chihuahua Papillon.
And what's his name?
Jameson.
Jameson. And where did you go to school?
I went to school back in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
What school?
Hempfield Area Senior High School.
Oh, when did you graduate?
In 2009.
Oh, great.
It's like my cat's name and then just like a random number.
Okay. Has you had this cat for a while?
Yeah, she's my childhood pet.
Aw. And what's her name?
Her name is Jolie.
Jolie. So like a password of yours would be Jolie and then a number.
Yeah.
Like number 1?
Like my birthday.
Oh, when is your birthday?
June 12th.
Oh, nice. What year were you born?
95.
Oh, great. So Jolie, 6/12/95.
Yes.
Got it.
Gemma. 1, 2, 3. Spelled Gemma.
Well, most of them are in Italian.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, so
Like what's a good Italian password?
my grandma's name,
What's your grandma's name?
Maria.
Maria. So Maria is your password?
Oh yeah, like, you know my password.
So obviously that's funny to watch, and it illustrates how easy it is to just ask somebody for their password. But really, it wouldn't be funny if it was a member of your staff, one of your employees. It's not quite so funny. And the video is actually also a great analogy to phishing emails. Being interviewed can throw you off your game. You don't want to say the wrong thing when you've got a microphone in your face. You don't want to be rude or question what's going on. So sometimes it's just easier to go along with it. The same is true with phishing emails. Good ones will have you feeling rushed or panic or pressured to comply with requests, and it just kind of makes it easier to go along with it. And I actually have a great story to share that I just heard recently. Last week, we had a meeting with a local construction company, and the vice president told us a story about shortly after one of their interns being hired, he received an email. The email looked like it came from one of the owners, and it said, hey, can I get your phone number? I want to text you some instructions. The intern said, yeah, of course, here's my number. Now that email didn't come from the boss, it came from a cybercriminal trying to get that person out of the work environment, away from the email, away from whatever security controls existed, and get him one-on-one to go back and forth with instructions. It just so happened that during their all-staff meeting later in the day, the intern received a text message that said, I want you to go get some gift cards under the guise of, it's for one of our clients as a gift. The intern looks over and sees the owner that he thought he was talking to, and by coincidence, he was on his phone. And that coincidence enough convinced the intern to go, this is real. Would you like me to go right now? The bad actor said, yes, right now. So this intern in an all-staff meeting stands up, walks out of the conference room, walks out the front door, and this is a conference room with glass windows all the way around it, and everyone watches him get into his car and just drive away. Everyone's like, where's the new guy going? And he went out and he bought the gift cards. He came back and the bad actor had sent him another text and said, hey, I need more. Well, the intern decided, hey, I'm going to go ask the owner if I can use the company credit card. And he walked into the owner's office and said, hey, for this next round, can I please use the company card? I have maxed out my credit card. And it was at that moment that they realized what was going on, and a pretty costly lesson was learned that day, about phishing. But the guy was out the money. He had scratched the numbers off the back, sent a picture, and delivered it to the bad actor for about $1,500. And I mean, it happened like that. And it was just kind of all based on coincidence. Things lined up right. And once he had that one-on-one trust, it was kind of over. So the obvious next question would be, what can you do to protect yourselves and your businesses from things like phishing and ransomware? The simple answer is do anything, do something. Just being here today is a great first step. The hardest part about cybersecurity is getting started. You may be surprised at how few small businesses actually have a cybersecurity plan in place. 43% of small businesses have zero cybersecurity defense. If you're one of the 43, consider making a change, today. That's a strong recommendation. A great place to start is finding an expert, someone that you can trust. Cybersecurity is dynamic. It's constantly changing, and it's crucial for business owners, office admins to understand and find someone that knows the threat landscape and understands that threats evolve and change, and you kind of have to maintain an understanding and more or less stay on top of it. But when we at Salvus talk to our partners about cybersecurity, we often reference old standards versus new standards. Years ago, having a firewall and having antivirus, that was enough. You were done. You were considered secure. But with advancements in technology and the ease of access to hacking tools, kind of like I said earlier, there is just so many resources for someone to learn how to do this. Firewall, antivirus, it just isn't sufficient anymore. That's the nature of cybersecurity, right? It's a cat and mouse game. We find a way to keep the criminals out, they find a way to get back in, and the cycle repeats. So that's why it's so important to stay up to date, because you can go from being fairly secure to pretty vulnerable pretty quickly. 5 years in the business world goes by fast, and if you're not thinking about it, you're just like, antivirus, firewall, I'm good, I'm done, until something happens. So what are the tools that every small business should have in place? The list on the left represents the old standards. These were the controls that if they were in place 5 years ago, you were doing everything you needed to do to be secure. The list on the right is what could be considered security best practices today. When we talk to our clients, all of the things on the right are strong recommendations, if not requirements. So we'll start with firewalls. Most businesses have one. You've had one for years. A traditional firewall, the old standard, works by monitoring and restricting network traffic in a very static way. This fixed method kind of leaves it vulnerable to modern cybersecurity threats. It just kind of goes with what I've been saying all day is things change, and if you don't change your technology, you're behind the 8 ball. Next generation firewalls operate on a more dynamic and inspect traffic at a much deeper level. And they can also prevent attackers from persistent control or presence on your network. The longer somebody's in, the more data they can exfiltrate. So a next generation firewall can help you combat people staying in for an extended period of time. Next generation firewalls also provide geolocation functionality. So you can block your network from being accessed from specific countries or states or IP addresses that are outside of your network. If you don't work with Russia or China or anybody outside of the US, you can block those connections by default. Next generation firewalls are incredibly flexible and scalable, and the control that it gives you can provide a really deep insight into how your network works, and then just kind of by default block a wider range of threats. Next is antivirus, and this is one that I'll try to go quickly on, but I could talk about it at length. Traditional antivirus, the old standard, has been around for decades, and it has become dangerously synonymous with business security. And what I mean by that is that if people think they have antivirus, that they are good. That is all they need. Nothing else matters. As long as the AV is installed, we're going to be fine. And unfortunately, that is not the case. Traditional antivirus works by using what's called signature-based detection. Pretty much a new virus is discovered, it is reported, somebody writes a definition about it, and then that definition is sent out to the antivirus program, so the next time it is seen, it's blocked. But that static approach leaves you vulnerable to new variants, and most strains of ransomware operate uniquely. So traditional AV and ransomware, they don't match. AV in its old state cannot combat against most strains of ransomware. So that's where endpoint detection and response comes in, or EDR. It's one of the best, if not the best, defense available to small businesses right now to combat viruses and ransomware. EDR works by leveraging artificial intelligence and behavior analysis to scan your network. EDR kind of learns how your staff and you use your computer, use your network, and it can spot anomalies in that behavior. I equate it to like a virtual security guard, knows everyone's face, knows how everyone works, knows where everyone works, and if it sees something outside of the norm, it can stop it and investigate it. I've got a real-world example of how EDR stopped a cyber attack that would have succeeded if traditional antivirus would have been in place. So this was a couple months ago on a Saturday. We received an alert from an EDR program that was installed on one of our clients' computers. It flagged this program as suspicious, and one of our techs engaged to investigate. When it flagged it as suspicious, it also stopped it from executing its code, so it kind of put it in a sandbox and says, you're going to stay here until we get somebody on to say this is good or this is bad. After investigating the program in question, we determined that it was in fact malware, and the cybersecurity community believes that this type of malware was designed to log keystrokes and steal credentials as well as deploy ransomware. So as the investigation continued, we determined that it came in through a phishing email. It was disguised as an invoice that was actually an Excel file, which was actually able to run a macro, which is more or less an executable program. And once it had made it onto the computer, it sat dormant and waited until Saturday to execute the payload. I think it was installed on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and then it just hung out and didn't do anything until Saturday. Like I mentioned, these threats are intelligently designed to wait till off hours to maximize damage. But when it finally decided to try to run that program, it called to a Windows program called PowerShell, which is a really powerful administrative level tool, which was seen as suspicious because the person that used that computer never opened PowerShell before, and also PowerShell in itself kind of raises some red flags because of what you can do with it. And the EDR program said, hold on, stop, and we were able to kind of go in there and mitigate the risk. So that's what sets EDR apart from traditional antivirus. Ransomware is the biggest threat. Traditional antivirus can't do anything about ransomware. Hence, if you want to feel protected, you need some type of endpoint detection and response solution. Backups are next. Arguably one of the most important pieces of a cybersecurity plan is preventing data loss, and one of the best ways to do that is with a good backup solution. Any backup is better than no backup. I know a lot of people out there that fly by night and have no backup in place at all. So anything is better than nothing. But in a full recovery scenario, like after a hardware failure or after a ransomware attack that you can't recover from, the difference between a file backup, which is the old standard, and an image-based backup is kind of night and day. File backups are incredibly slow to recover from. Depending on the size of your data set and your network speed, you could be down for days just to restore the data. That doesn't count in the time it would take to rebuild the server or the workstations affected. So while backing up your files on an external hard drive is better than nothing, and it might be cost effective, you would pay long-term in downtime. The new standard is image-based backups. An image-based backup is just what it sounds like. It takes a picture of the entire system and can be used to quickly recover from an incident. And we're talking like an hour or two with the right solution and not days. But the image-based aspect is only a small part of a larger concept called business continuity and disaster recovery. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit more depth in a bit. But the biggest takeaway here is that image-based backups are the quickest route to recovery after a ransom event or some other disaster like a fire or a flood. The truth is, though, it's good to have both file backups so that you can recover individual files easily, but an image base just in case of disaster. All right, next I want to talk about protecting the inbox. Again, 3 billion phishing emails a day. So the inbox is crucial to protect. Spam filtering, the old standard, that was something that was a welcome addition in 2001 when it was invented. Nowadays, every email provider, even the free ones like Google, have spam filtering built in. Office 365 users get a bit of a better spam filter kind of baked into your license. But even with third-party, enterprise-grade, world-class email security tools, some of those 3 billion are going to get through. So what happens when one makes it through? It winds up in your inbox or your intern's inbox or your receptionist inbox, and you have to hope that they know how to spot it and can avoid being phished. But you really don't have to hope with employee training. I would assume that none of you out here would let someone operate a company truck without a driver's license. It would be dangerous to allow someone to operate a company truck without the experience and the know-how. And honestly, the responsibility of operating a company truck is not that much different than operating an email account. It can be risky if somebody doesn't know what they're doing. And one of the best ways to ensure that your employees are capable of protecting your organization is with ongoing cybersecurity awareness training. This approach to security education helps businesses kind of create their own company cybersecurity culture, and it helps develop employee accountability. And that's something that's kind of new. 5 years ago, someone could ransomware the company and be like, I'm really sorry, no one told me how to check email. I'm really sorry that I clicked that link, but no one told me how. Those days are over, and we all have to be accountable. If you're given, keys to the door, you can't just leave the front door unlocked. So that's kind of where employee awareness training comes in. Employee error is the #1 cause of data breaches worldwide, and cybercriminals are taking advantage of this, kind of like I said earlier. So arming your employees with the knowledge of how to spot and then respond to phishing attempts will significantly lower your risk of a successful attack. And the keyword here, which isn't up there, which I regret, is ongoing. A lot of organizations will train their staff once or twice a year, and that's great. Again, a lot of this stuff is better some than none. But most organizations that train once a year will see improvement over a month or two. But then after that, people start to backslide into bad habits. There's the rule of 7, right? You have to hear the message 7 times for it to sink in. Advertisers will tell you that. Some teachers will tell you that. And the same is true with cybersecurity. You have to hear the same thing about 7 times before it really sinks in and it becomes just, operating procedure. So the ongoing approach kind of keeps cybersecurity top of mind every time somebody's in their inbox. In addition to formal ongoing training, there are tools out there now that can allow you to deliver simulated phishing tests to your staff on an ongoing schedule as well, sending convincing simulated phishing emails that look and behave like real-world attacks will test your employees' awareness and kind of gauge how they react to phishing and social engineering attacks. They really serve as a benchmark for who in your organization is prone to clicking, and then you can take that information and plan remediation and additional training. So I, for one, would want to know who in my organization is prone to clicking real phishing emails so I could do something about it. And honestly, I tell people all the time that if I owned a company, in addition to all of this stuff, I would, once a week at a minimum, just tell people, be mindful, take a minute and read that email. Hover your mouse over the link, just constantly, to the point where they would probably get so annoyed with me. But the ongoing approach is so important that I would happily, take the flack for being super annoying. We offer the same employee awareness training, and what we found is that over a year of this style of training, we see the number of what we call phish-prone users and test failures drop to under 3%, and actually most clients hit that 0% mark at some point through that calendar year. So the ongoing approach to employee awareness training is incredibly effective. Strong and complex passwords are one of the most implemented security solutions. I think everyone has had a password on a computer or a phone for forever. And they're still critical to secure your data. You still need to use a password. Some have arguments about what constitutes a good password. Some will say a passphrase is better than a complex password. A passphrase is something that's like really long and unique, making it hard to guess or to crack. Summer is my second favorite season would be a good passphrase for me to use if I hadn't just said it out loud. The reason security experts think that the passphrase is better than a complex password with a bunch of characters and numbers is because it is less likely to wind up on a sticky note under your keyboard or smacked up against your monitor. By the way, if any of you have a sticky note under your keyboard or smacked up against your monitor or an Excel spreadsheet with all of your passwords in it, get rid of it. Just get rid of it today. LastPass, Dashlane, those are free password managers that are super easy to use, and they're free at a personal level. You've got to pay at the enterprise level, but I mean, again, anything is better than the sticky note or the Excel spreadsheet.
What if your Excel spreadsheet isn't named passwords?
You're why I'm here today.
I'm not going to tell you what the name is.
I'd find it. I know cybersecurity is overwhelming, and I know in some cases it's super boring. I call it security lethargy, and it is a real thing. For whatever reason, people can only take so much of it. But this next one is one that I want everyone to take note of because it's easy to implement, incredibly effective, and in most cases it's free. So there's no reason for everyone here not to use it. So like I said, a password alone is not enough to secure your accounts anymore. What happens if your password is guessed or phished or stolen from your Excel spreadsheet that's not named passwords? The short answer is nothing good because your password was your only line of defense. Once it's gone, the bad actor's in. But multi-factor authentication can protect your accounts even if your password is stolen. Most people know what multi-factor authentication is, or MFA. But for those who don't, a good quick example is using an ATM or a debit card, right? Every time you're asked for your PIN or your zip code, you're providing that second form of authentication. It's just a combination of information to verify your identity. Their factors are normally a mix of something you know, like a PIN or a password, something you have, like a debit card or a key fob for a door, or something you are, like a thumbprint. MFA is included in most cloud services, and it provides a free additional layer of security. Microsoft says that it will stop 99% of business email compromises, even if your password is stolen. So it's the easiest way to quickly and significantly improve your cybersecurity posture. If you take one thing away from today, MFA should be it. Turn it on everywhere you can. Google Gmail MFA, Office 365 MFA, Facebook MFA, Amazon MFA, any place where you go online and put in a username and a password, they should have a free option for MFA and everyone should turn it on. A lot of people tell me they avoid MFA because they feel like it would be obtrusive and kind of interrupt their workflow, and I can see that. It's not fun to have to put in your username, put in your password, pull out your phone, copy a code, put it back into the computer. Maybe you just have to tap yes. At first, it does feel obtrusive, but it is way too effective to not use it. I mean, the trade-off is just so far in the other category that it's my strongest recommendation today. Turn on MFA where it's not enabled. So at Salvus, we're already seeing the new wave of standards. By the time I'm done, one of these is going to be replaced with something new. All the things on the right are slowly moving to the left, and they're going to be replaced with new controls. Again, it's simply the nature of cybersecurity, a constant cat and mouse game. But cyber criminals aren't the only ones driving that change anymore. Compliancy and insurance audits are having a really big effect as well. Thanks to our clients, we get to see which controls are required by different governing bodies and insurance underwriters. A few years ago, they weren't asking for much. If you had everything on the left side of the list, you were going to pass your audit and your premiums were going to stay low. Since then, things have changed significantly. Compliance is far more strict and demanding if you want to keep your costs down. And if you've never considered cybersecurity insurance, now is a great time. The average cost of a data breach in the United States hit a record high this year of $4.3 million. If you look to just the small business sector, that cost goes down to a few $100,000 to $1 million, but still a pretty significant cost for just one security incident. All right, so what are the cyber insurers and compliancy auditors looking for today? This turn off on me? Multi-factor authentication, endpoint detection and response, and employee training are all things that we have already talked about. But these controls are on almost every single cybersecurity insurance form and audit we see. Next is SOC SIM. If I was to guess and I redid the old standard versus new standard slide next year, SOC and SIM is something that's going to be added to that new standard list. This one's technical, but I'm going to do my best. A security operations center, or a SOC, and a security incident and event management system, the SIM, are strategies that work jointly to monitor your network and identify potential data breaches. A SOC is expert personnel, human beings, and technology combined with processes to monitor networks and endpoints around the clock. The goal of the SOC is to proactively detect these threats and remediate them to mitigate risk and damage. The SIM is more of the technology side of that. It's used by members of the SOC as kind of a centralized hub so that they can visualize the data and the alerts that point to suspicious network activity or a potential cyber threat. So again, super technical. I'm going to try to simplify that even more, even though that is even already a very simplified way to explain it. But everything on your network makes noise. Millions of lines of code and alerts and logs are made just by using your technology. So the SIM uses artificial intelligence to read all that code faster than a person could, and it flags anything it thinks is suspicious. And then that's given to the SOC, which are humans, and then they look at it and they go, is this real or is this a false positive? And they make that determination. And if it is real, they engage. If it's not, they delete and they move on. This always-on 24/7 approach to network monitoring is required by several industries already, especially those bidding on government contracts or working with the DoD. I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, we are not that regulated. That sounds a little extreme, and you are probably right. Most small businesses today do not need a SOC and SIM solution, but 5 years ago, people were saying the same thing about EDR, and now it's just expected. These controls have a tendency to trickle down from government to enterprise and then finally down to small business. So just know SOC and SIM exists, and it has the possibility of becoming a, quote, standard piece of a cybersecurity plan in the near future. Business continuity and disaster recovery. So circling back to earlier when we were talking about backups, business continuity and disaster recovery is a company's ability to resume daily operations if impacted by an unexpected incident or a disaster that takes down core business systems. This could be a fire, a flood, or a ransomware attack. A good continuity plan revolves around implementing these protocols to restore functions in a predetermined amount of time, commonly referred to as the recovery time objective, or how long can you afford to be down. And identifying an acceptable level of data loss or a recovery point objective, how much saved work can we afford to lose back in time. For most businesses, they feel like if they have a copy of their data, if they have a backup, they have a continuity solution. And for some, that might be acceptable, but not every business can afford to be down for days or weeks or some even hours. So if your business can't afford significant downtime, your continuity plan should consist of, at a minimum, hybrid data backups. So that's image-based data backups both on-site and in the cloud. So you have on-site for a quick recovery, and then in the cloud for redundancy in case something happens to the on-site location, and for virtualization if necessary. And you also need a predetermined disaster recovery plan. So it's crucial to have like an actionable plan in place, methodology to follow if something were to happen. Maybe you can access your data from the cloud, so your plan is to send everybody home with their laptops and work from home. Maybe you have a backup service that can create a virtual server in the cloud, and everyone can work off of that until the server is rebuilt or the workstations are repaired. Just so you know, there are backup solutions that provide the full BCDR solution kind of in a box, and they're surprisingly affordable. Either way, it's just important to have an actual plan in place if something were to happen. The last on the list is something that could have been on the old versus new list, but it's on every single compliancy form and an audit that we see. So I included it here for that reason. From a security perspective, patching is simply filling the holes in information technology systems that have been released to the public. A good example is the constant Windows updates, or when you get an alert on your phone that says iOS update available now. These updates add or rewrite code to eliminate bugs and fix vulnerabilities in software, firewalls, network equipment, operating systems. And as an added bonus, patching can kind of help make educated business decisions and intelligent purchasing. If you notice that a piece of your technology is constantly requiring patches or updates, that could be indicative of a device or software that's prone to security risks. So you can kind of put that off to the side, slate it for audit, or maybe even replacement. Patching is a lot of work. It's super overwhelming, especially as your business grows, but it's extremely important. At a minimum, just make sure that your server and your workstation operating systems are up to date, but know that auditors will expect to see third-party programs and network equipment up to date as well. And, oh yeah, this isn't working. And that's it. I jokingly say that's it because I know we covered a ton of ground fast. I really do love talking about cybersecurity, and if you ever have a question or want more clarity on a control that we talked about today, or maybe something that we didn't talk about today, I encourage you to take down my information and reach out whenever you would like. Also, Jane said our website and social channels are chock full of cybersecurity content aimed at the small business community. I would encourage everyone to take a look, not just because I write it all, but because I write it with hopes that it will help someone either improve their cybersecurity or maybe defend against a cyber attack. So check out our LinkedIn, our Facebook, our YouTube, and our blog on our website if you're interested. I know we got some time left, maybe, Matt, do we? I would like to thank Paths Law Firm for sponsoring today's Recess for Success. That's a mouthful. And the Chamber for having me speak. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to do my best to answer them.
What were the two password programs? LastPass was one?
LastPass and Dashlane.
Dashlane?
Dashlane. There are a ton of them out there. OnePass, I think, is another one. They're all about the same, and at that personal level, they all should have a free option.
What about RoboForm?
RoboForm? I've never heard of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Is it a password manager? Yeah. They're all about the same. We are LastPass resellers, but we work with clients that have both LastPass and Dashlane. We feel like they're about the same. Just, again, it's that anything over nothing. Any password manager is better than an Excel spreadsheet or, my dad's got a manila envelope in his office. Anything is better than that.
Matt, on that next-gen firewall.
Yes.
On the OSI model, would that be using a application or layer 7 type?
Yes.
Okay.
It would.
Okay.
I'm really glad that didn't get too much deeper.
Well, I'm with Bluebird Network on the OSI model. We are layer 1.
Yeah.
We provide the data transport. So,
Right.
But yeah, so it actually looks at the application
Correct.
that's actually going on to identify threats.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it gets, the next gen firewalls can get really deep when it comes to applications, allow lists, what applications are allowed to touch. It's way over my head.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
The way they do it,
Yeah.
it actually looks at the content and the sourcing of it, and
It's nuts.
it's pretty cool.
Yep. And
How expensive is software like that?
I think that I think that a firewall, like a next-gen firewall, would be somewhere around $1,200, and then the software to run it on a yearly is about $300. So it's about
it's constantly updated too. It's not just you put it in there and leave it.
Yeah, and then just like a computer, it'll get years out of it. It's not something that's replaced every year. 5 to 7 years is about the benchmark for just about any technology out there. Computer, server, switch, firewall, 5 to 7 years, maybe 7 to 10 depending on what you buy if you invest. But
And that's pretty long in the IT world. Well, see, the IT world a year is about 3.2 months.
yeah,
And to connect it with the larger picture too, cloud hosting kind of mitigates some of those costs.
100%.
Because if you use the cloud hosting, you can apply some of the software as a service models rather than having to maintain and retain your own hardware.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, the cloud has been and will continue to be the wave. More people are moving to it. It's becoming cheaper every day, easier to access every day. And with the state of the world, with so many people working from anywhere, it's taken over the planet. Azure, Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, all of these things. We've seen just a gigantic upswing in the last 2 years alone. People wanting to move to a more cloud infrastructure, just because it takes away the headache of a lot of this stuff, right? Your server's off premise; it's not much of a concern anymore. Your people aren't downloading anything anymore. From a cybersecurity perspective,
You can still be hybrid. You can still have some.
sure, and a lot of people do.
Yeah.
QuickBooks keeps so many people from going 100% cloud because QuickBooks Online is awful, and they're like, no, we're gonna keep it. So, but every day it seems like we're getting closer and closer to everyone winding up on the cloud.
What about Google password management function? Do you recommend that?
Like within the browser?
Yeah.
Yes and no. It's good to have as long as it itself is password protected. For me, when I used to use it, I could just log into my computer, and then if I opened Google, all of my passwords would be there. I would want to have that second layer of I log into my computer, and then I open up Google Chrome, and then I have to put in another password before I can get to my entire list of passwords. I think there's a way to do that, but it also kind of gives you some inconvenience of having to sign out of Chrome every time to make sure that you have to put in a password twice.
and a good way to connect with security on a larger picture is to look at liability, right? Security is all about liability and managing your liability and how much you want to spend to manage those different liabilities and the different costs.
Yeah, a few $100s goes a long way, but you could spend. Cybersecurity is incredibly expensive,
If you have $1 million worth of client data and then you didn't spend $200, you'll kick yourself in the butt later for it.
I can't tell you how many times I've had that conversation before and then after. It's painful. Yeah. When it's before, it's like pulling teeth. It's like $200 a year. Give me $200 a year to implement this. But then after something happens, it's like, here's $20,000. Make sure this never happens again. It's just funny how the budget loosens up after a cybersecurity event. Every time.
Do you have any services you recommend so that you can run a test email campaign?
I don't have any free options.
I know they're not free.
Are you talking about?
So I don't know if there's something called Know Before.
Yep, that's what we use.
You can do that'll let you kind of start a campaign and see how vulnerable you actually are, right? So if you feel like, hey, I'm comfortable, it'll never happen to me, you might be surprised.
Does Know Before have a free option?
I don't think so. I don't know if the requirements are free. I think you do have to pay, but
So we use Know Before. We've used a couple, and Know Before is by far the one that we've liked the best. I don't know if they have an option. I feel like they have some sort of free option when it comes to investigating your users, but I think eventually they paywall you and they say, you need to pay to play. But yeah, Know Before is a great platform for phish testing and awareness training of your staff. Again, often questions come a day or two later, and I'm not kidding. Feel free to send me an email, drop me a line. I'm always happy to chat about this kind of stuff.
Awesome. Big round of applause for that.
Thanks, everybody.